thing. Because a section of people disbelieve doesn't mean that the entire group also disbelieve. So again, you're still stuck. There is no claim anywhere in your corpus that Christianity is worse than homosexuality. Yes, there might be the instances where the Quran criticizes some Christians or certain Christians, but in the same capacity, it tells you to come to terms with them, that you both worship one God. So effectively, if you're claiming that the Quran is castigating Christians, well, I can quote you an equal number of verses where it is supporting them. So, you are wrong, and you must take back your statement that homosexuality, or Christianity, sorry, is worse than that, because like I told you, there is no instance where...
The Quran mentions in some verses that some Christians were monotheists, and those Christians are not included in what I'm talking about. The Quran, for example, mentions that the ones who were the Hawariyun, the ones who, the disciples of Jesus Christ, the ones that are actually followers of Jesus Christ, they were not the ones we were talking about here. I'm talking about shirk itself, the polytheistic claim. If you believe that Jesus is God, the Quran is very crystal clear, and you can refer to my previous statement, that that is worse than any other sin in Islam. Number one. Number two is, Islam mentions very clearly that believing in Jesus is shirk, that he's a God, that is shirk. My question to you now is, my question to you is very simple. How can you believe that Jesus is God on the one hand, and that he was begotten from the God, which means that he was caused by the Father? How can a God be caused? That's my question. It's a very simple question. I answered your question in charity. I educated you in front of the people, no problem. Now it's now your turn to answer my question. How can a God be caused by the Father? Tell me how. How can it be begotten and caused? That's the question.
Why don't you talk from their own Quran?
You're still running away from my question. So, you mentioned two verses. Number one, you mentioned the verse about the Hawariyun. Okay, perfect. Now, here's my challenge to you. Identify who these Hawariyun are. You cannot, because the Quran will provide for you who they are. Now, for example, if you go over to your tafsirs, they quote people like Paul or Bullis as being one of these Hawariyun. So in that case, we can tell that Paul taught Trinitarianism. He said Jesus was God, the Father was God, and the Spirit was God. So effectively, if you can identify who these true believers are, then your statements are non sequitur. We can, and they all taught us the rationality that we have today, and the Father, Son, and Spirit are all God. So therefore, that verse does not support you, it actually hampers what you're saying. Secondly, when you mention the verse about people taking his mother Mary, Jesus, as God besides or in derogation to, and it's different. In the same way, no Christian believes that you can take the Messiah and his mother as a God besides the Father. So again, you are not helping yourself, and your claim is incorrect.
Okay, so Hawariyun is mentioned in Quran chapter number 3, verse Surah Al-Imran. فلما أحس منهم الكفر قال من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله آمنا به. That is clearly mentioned that the ones who are, when Jesus felt that people were going to disbelieve in him, he said, who are the ones who will give me victory with Allah? The Hawariyun mentioned that we will give you victory with Allah. So clearly, the Hawariyun are those who are close to Jesus.
Saint Peter.
The disciples. Now you made the claim that the disciples believed in the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit as three co-equal, co-eternal, the Trinity, which the three major schools of Christianity believe in. Give me one evidence for that, please. Give me one evidence from the Bible that you've just quoted that the disciples of Jesus believed in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, co-equal, co-eternal Trinity, the like of which is mentioned in the Nicene Creed. Give me the evidence, and now tackle my question that you couldn't tackle, which is that how can you say a God is caused when you say that Jesus is begotten by the Father, he's generated by him? So answer those two questions if you can.
You failed to actually notify me of any Hawariyun. You mentioned a group of people that you have no idea who they are, what they taught, what they said. So you have absolutely no basis whatsoever by which you can claim that these people are true believers when you don't even know who they are, what they taught. So you're lost there. Now, you're kind of run away. I see it, and don't worry, I will answer you. But you have to recount your statement. Otherwise, I'm going to make the claim that Islam is, cannibalism, or Islam in that sense, is worse than Islam. So if you're a cannibal, you're better off than being a Muslim, because at least cannibals don't hold to the fact that you have to own slaves, marry children, have sex slaves, or even commit war against the entire world. So cannibalism is better than Islam. And I have no reason to prove that. I have no way of proving that, but I'm just going to say it because it's inflammatory. So if you want to get an inflammatory claim, I'll make one too. So if you're not going to take yours back, but my main point here is that you cannot prove your points by appealing to Islam. It's just an opinion. So it's pointless.
Okay, so that's the gish galloping thing now. You've lost. You couldn't answer the questions I asked you. I asked you 2 questions. You couldn't answer one of them. So now you have to go to child marriage and this and this and that. Child marriage, which was mentioned in the Bible, chapter number 31, verse number 18 of Numbers, where clearly the Babylonian Talmud and the Palestinian Talmud say that you can rape little girls, and that's mentioned in your rabbi's text. So let's talk about child marriage. The only religion on the face of the earth is Judaism and Christianity, which actually endorses child marriage in the book of Numbers, and you can look at the primary text. Number 1. Number 2, you couldn't answer my question. My question was very simple, is how can you say a God which is meant to be uncaused is begotten? Jesus is meant to be generated and caused by God, but how can he be uncaused and caused at the same time? It's a simple question. You are dumbfounded, you are bedazzled, you are completely, you are discombobulated. No, you're discombobulated. He doesn't have any response for this question, so I'm telling you now that unless you can answer this question, everyone here, Christian and Muslim, is going to realize that you have no answer, just like William Lane Craig had no answer, just like all the Christian scholars I've ever spoken to have no answer, just like Christianity has no answer. Go ahead, answer.
So you have conceded to the point that Christianity is worse than homosexuality. You couldn't actually substantiate it, therefore your claim is baseless. Awesome. However, my claim still stands that Islam is worse than cannibalism. Anyway, let's move on from there. So now you're running away. Now you're appealing to text. So, not to mention that you are the one who said here very boldly that if you simply read the Quran, it actually advocates for an extreme form of pedophilia. You said that, I didn't say that. I don't appeal to any rabbis for my text. However, I don't know what you were appealing to there, obviously the Quran. So, in the Quran, according to you, your own words, HIJAB, again, you're making these statements that you can't actually back up. You said that the Quran advocates for a very severe form of pedophilia. Numbers doesn't do that, Samuel doesn't do that, the Quran does. Hooray for HIJAB. Now, if I have any time, now, in my next point, I'm going to then tackle your points about begottenness and also show you how your God isn't real because he lacks certain qualities that make him, or should make him, the first true cause of everything.
Right, so this lie that has to be propagated by Christians when they have nothing else to say, that I said such and such about the Quran, is actually the opposite of what I said. And not just that, a Dutch judge gave me a ruling in that favor. They actually looked at my words and they said that people like you online have been fabricating it to the point where it went to the ministers in Holland and I beat them in the case. So people can decide whether to believe you, who's a nobody who no one knows their name, or a Dutch judge who has nothing to do with me anyway. That's number 1. Number 2 now you're running away from the question again, aren't you? You're running away from the question. How can a God be caused? Do you believe Jesus Christ was begotten by God? He was begotten by the Father. Now my question, very simple, and this is the 5th time I'm asking this question. Can you imagine 5 times asking one question, that he has the audacity in every preamble of what he says to say that I'm not answering him, that I'm running away from him? I'm saying, give me one answer to this question. How can a God be begotten? How can a God be generated? How can Jesus be caused? How can an uncaused thing be caused? Simple question, go ahead.
Alrighty. Ready? Yes. Okay. The judge has no name. Your case has no detail. Throw it out. So, you are still advocating for pedophilia, and that will always be a mar on your credibility and your career. I'm glad everyone knows your name because they can now associate you with pedophilia. Well done, HIJAB. Congratulations. Now, how can a God be begotten? Very simply, we hold that there's a distinction between the Father and the Son. The Father is the efficient cause, and the Son proceeds from the Father in a way that is atemporal, so there is no time difference between when the Son exists and when the Father exists. Not to forget, Paul tells us that the Son is the very power and wisdom of the Father. In order for the Father to actually will or perform any action, he requires his wisdom and his will and his power, and that is the Son. So in the same way that your voice emanates from you, but it's not different from you, but distinct from you, the Son emanates from the Father, but is not separate from him, only distinct. Distinct by virtue of point of origin, for example. But there is no time gap or time difference. Now,
great answer.
He says he's not separate from him, but distinct. Did you notice he said that? Which is basically separation and distinction are synonyms. He's not separate, but he's separate. It's basically what he's saying because he's an ignorant person. He couldn't answer my question. The question simply is this. Instead of trying to talk about pedophilia, which is mentioned in your Bible, chapter number 31, verse number 18, stop mentioning about pedophilia because maybe that shows something about your projecting something to me today. The point of the fact is this, is that you can't answer one simple question. I've just asked you, how could it be possible that you believe in Jesus as God? Simple thing. I'm saying, the Quran says this is shirk. The ones who believe that Jesus is God are committing shirk. How can you say a God is caused? in any capacity, the definition of a God is that a God is uncaused. How can you be a caused and uncaused thing at the same time? You have no answer, and this is your last attempt, so you better make it a good one. Go ahead and tell us, how can a God be caused and uncaused at the same time? Go.
Pedophilia will always go something when you see your name. That's your problem, not mine. So, now when it comes to the nature of Allah, because they're going to ask the question. Now, Allah cannot be God because He is the one who is called. Why is this? You don't affirm divine simplicity. Your God is composed of parts, whether those be metaphorical or real parts, like his arms and his eyes. Now, when it comes then to him being composed of parts, that then means that he is devoid of being the first efficient cause of a thing, because if something is composed of parts, then there could be efficiently, logically speaking, a composer of those parts. So your God cannot be the efficient cause. So your God is created. Your God is simply an idol. That is why you are worshiping something that doesn't actually exist or have a real existence. I'm not done. And therefore, our God, not being composed of parts, means that he is the cause and yours cannot be. Okay. There you go.
Done.
So,
Hit the like family.
This discussion by asking me to bring evidence from the Quran that believing Jesus is God is shirk. Hold on. Dave, stay. What the hell?
I think it's the second Dawah dash, guys. I don't know what happened. I think Jude got. Oh, they got the game. Oh, they got the game. They got the game. I think they're gonna get him. What a way to spoil the debate. Oh, it's getting physical. At least they got him. Oh, they got it.
You're lucky you didn't get banged, you know. You're lucky you didn't get banged.
Why he got caught up? Why? What did he do?
Sure.
And I hope I didn't drop someone's mic.
He stole someone's phone.
That guy.
I stole someone's phone.
You are. He's amazing.
Yep. Thank you for hearing that.
He stole someone's phone.
I think it just was my...
So apparently he stole someone's phone. I don't know, cool. If the guy was a Muslim or a Christian. But they got him. And I think they might take him to the police.
No, take him to the fence.
Why are you doing?
What do you do though? Where is he?
Let go.
Take him to the fence. What are you doing?
He stole the phone.
Yeah, we're gonna find out.
He stole something.
Yeah, he stole something, huh?
Yeah.
He stole something.
He stole a phone or something. Bro, he stole the phone. He stole, bro. He stole.
Why is he running?
Yo. Hold a minute. Someone's gonna call the feds.
Why is he running?
Yeah, it's a fence. Fence gone though.
Guys, what would Jesus do? Come on.
I told you to put it on stage today. See what's going on today. I have
Walk away.
You're lying. You're lying. You're lying.
I was holding him back.
Dave.
Come on, we're brothers. Ask him what you do up there.
Yeah, but I think there was a third one on me.
Did you have one of these?
No, HIJAB got my mic, so let's go back to the debate, or might as well. So, Big Dave, for context for the Soccer family, what happened there?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, I assume that he had stolen something.
Yeah, I think
Which is why
somebody
I went
said it was a
after.
phone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's not.
I wasn't being told all of the details, so hopefully they'll find out.
Right, cool.
I am going to go back and cook.
Right, cool. So we go back to the debate, family. Yeah. Bit of RG, nothing serious. Make sure you hit the like, share, and yeah, and Bob's there.
Did I? I was joined by a second.
Yes.
Sorry. No.
I don't see necessarily that's the only opinion. So there's another opinion, which is the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah himself. He believes in something called HIJAB. He believes in a chain of things that happen. God can perpetually create into the past. I can see that that's a logical possibility.
Okay.
And even a textual one to some extent, but I'm not saying that
So
I
you're
agree with that.
essentially saying that someone who denies the first act is just not, is still in the body of Islam,
Yes.
that you personally hold to this position. Okay, so then the composition argument that firstly, you deny divine simplicity, that all of the attributes within God is identical to himself. Therefore, all of Allah's attributes are going to be less than the whole itself. If therefore he is composite, because he's composed of things that are less than the whole itself. Even though Ibn Taymiyyah wants to say, for example, that either these are abstract descriptors or something which is
Doesn't say that.
inseparable.
He doesn't say that.
Well, he says that it's inseparable from the whole itself, and you
What
want to
does?
take away.
What does?
Yeah, that
What is?
his attributes are inseparable from the whole. But I allowed you to speak, so if you want to say that I'm mischaracterizing his position after the time of me speaking, that's absolutely
Just
fine.
get to the point,
But
man.
if this is
Stop
going to
talking.
be a refutation of
You're speaking, just talk. You're wasting my time.
I'll get there. And this is why I said we should have a time time discussion and not one where you interrupt me and I interrupt you.
Just go get to the
So
point.
the point is that
What's
you,
the question?
because you said I have to load this in a question, I have to go for a line of premises and ask the conclusion.
You're boring
as a question.
everyone around you. Ask the
Okay,
questions.
because
No, it's not. You're running him down. You don't worry, I'm back. Hey, you run.
Look at me, I am very still. I very much want to talk to you.
Sure.
And in fact, I propose that we have a time discussion. So
All
we
right,
have a
does someone want to
formality.
time it? 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute.
One minute.
And the
That's fair,
agreed
that's fair.
discussion for the sake
That's
of the
fair.
camera is first you issue of Christianity that Christ cannot be God because he has a cause. And then my argument to you is going to be that your God cannot be the God of natural theology because you reject divine simplicity, therefore implying that your God is composite and the first act is going to be composing himself.
Do you accept the fact that in Christianity there are different views on divine simplicity?
Yeah, and that's kuffar.
No, hold on. Do you accept the fact
No,
that you don't accept that?
I don't grant that these people are Christian.
Oh, okay. So what strand of Christianity do you follow?
Eastern Orthodoxy.
Okay, so is Eastern Orthodoxy unanimous in its proclamation of divine simplicity?
Yeah, like
dogma.
so like either like for example, St. Maximus wants to affirm absolute divine simplicity, or some of the Cappadocians want to further like divine simplicity. But at least we're going to have to affirm divine simplicity. Now you're just simply appealing, and I know this isn't your rhetoric. Oh, there are
We
some
haven't started the
people.
time yet.
There are some people.
Are you going to do 1 minute, 1 minute? Do you want to do 1 minute?
Yeah,
1 minute?
of course, but you asked me a question. I'm trying to give a sufficient
You
answer.
can have a minute, go ahead.
You
1 minute starts now.
Wait, no, hold on. You said something on time, so I want to say something on time.
Go ahead.
So I want to make this very clear. Do not appeal to people I do not agree are Christian. You can say, oh, these people claim Christianity.
Protestants are not Christians.
I would say that there is a second-fold term that we could use. For example, there is a colloquial term that we can call these people Christian because they attempt to follow the faith of Christ, but they don't actually follow the legitimate. No, of course, they try to, but they're not.
Okay, can I ask you a question then? On a serious, because you seem to be reading on these issues as well, yeah?
Yeah.
So, okay, divine simplicity, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's say, for example, look at Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas.
I don't agree with Thomas
I
Aquinas.
know, but he believes in divine simplicity, and he's one of.
But like, do I
understand.
take that he's going to come to a conclusion of divine simplicity?
You haven't asked
therefore
a question. Have you asked your question?
Okay, so the question is going to be on an individual I don't care about. Great.
Okay, no problem. But what I'm saying is that he divided the attributes of God into univocal, equivocal, and analogy. Do you accept that distinction or not?
I mean, in terms of, for example, his understanding of Scripture when it says, for example, like God
Do you
is
understand these
jealous.
distinctions? Do you understand this or not?
Yeah, but like, I want you to argue why I should take Thomas Aquinas as a source.
No,
of
I'm not.
information.
That wasn't my question.
Yeah.
My question was not that.
Listen, like, I don't have to concern myself with Aquinas as a point. So let's actually get to the argument.
That's not my question. My question was.
Yeah, and my clarifying question to you is why should I care?
Okay. No. My question is this: when you're discussing the attributes of God,
Yeah.
is it okay for you to hold to the distinctions that are held by someone like Thomas Aquinas and or Duns Scotus, or does that make no sense?
So
to you?
I'm just going to say that when we speak of God's attributes, the common definition of the word, as to avoid his attributes being non-cognitive, like saying, oh, God has this and is blah, blah, blah. The common definition of the word is the same, but the way that God possesses it is different.
So which scholars of Christianity do you accept as authoritative?
I mean, is this going to be... The scholars that I can agree with are the corpus of the Church Fathers and the canonized saints.
Sure. So someone like Gregory of Nazianzus, someone like Gregory of Nyssa, you'd accept as authoritative?
Oh, of course.
Sure.
No.
Beautiful.
Okay. You notice how I said I can agree with them, not that I have to. There's a distinction.
No, but is that not the case in Greek Orthodoxy?
Yeah, I can agree with them. Only theological claims at synods or councils which are dogmatized. So, for example, I don't have to say that Cyril is authoritative, but I have to say his letters add emphasis on. You see the distinction?
Yeah, I see the distinction. So,
Okay, because he wants to pre.
No.
As to
Always fine.
offload the discussion. Okay, how about this? He complained about it. So let's actually have a time discussion. But firstly,
No, it's good that I got to the bottom of who is his authority.
You give me a formal argument of why Christ cannot be God because of my own tradition. Go for it.
Sure.
And I want you or whoever's timing this to time the discussion.
Do you accept, before I start, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
On the Cappadocian Fathers, Gregory of Nyssa, Gregory of Nazianzus, and Cyril.
Yeah, but I'm just going to say like...
No, hold on. You accepted that there are figures of authority in terms of your religion, right?
Yeah, in terms of things that I
So
can
when it
agree
comes to
with.
the Trinity, do you accept them as figures of authority?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, excellent. Let's get started.
Go on then.
No, you start off.
Okay, so premise one, you reject divine simplicity, the concept that God, all of his attributes are going to be identical to himself.
Sure.
Conclusion two, you say that his parts are going to be less than the whole itself. Conclusion 1, therefore, your God is composites. Point 3, your own tradition of Sunni Islam says that God is the first act. Premise 4, therefore, if he is composing himself, therefore the first act is going to be composing himself. Conclusion 2, therefore, if you want to say that Allah is the God of natural theology, this would not follow through because you said that this first principle's first act is going to be created, which within the previous premises had been outlined as, for example, him composing himself. The first act is not creating, it is composing, which therefore means we cannot reason Allah through natural theology. You accept natural theology, therefore, of course, then this is just going to be something which either reduces the...
Time up.
So I'll be honest, I'll need to hear that argument again because I didn't understand it. I'll need to hear that one more time for you because I'll give him 30 seconds. Can you say the argument again?
Well, how am I supposed to? I wasn't even finished my argument in 2 minutes. How am I supposed to do it in 30 seconds?
Alright, take a minute.
Okay, so take 2 minutes like we agreed upon.
No, take 1 minute. Take 1 minute. You can speak.
Well, how about this? For the simple child discussing with me here, we go premise by premise in an untimed situation because I'm not going to have less than 2 minutes to talk in an argument I hadn't even been able to finish. Okay, so you reject divine simplicity, the concept that all of the attributes within God is identical to himself. Speak up. Premise 2, you say that the attributes of God are less than the whole itself. Conclusion 1, therefore your God is composite. Conclusion 3,
Why does that follow?
because if he is composed of things that are less than the whole itself, therefore we can pick out things which are going to be really distinct from him, which are less than him, which means that they're going to be things that are comprising himself.
Now say that again, say that again. Say again.
So what we determine...
Premise 1, you said that
you rejected divine simplicity.
So hold on.
Now, I want to make this very clear. This discussion is not going to be Muhammad Hijab saying, what is this? What is this? Define this. It's going to be that he literally said in his refutation of divine simplicity that he understood the argument and it's weak. So he knows it. Don't be disingenuous and don't play a definition game because I'm really not here for it, mate. So you know what I'm saying. So don't be disingenuous to yourself. Continue.
Alright, so he's attempting. I've heard it very clearly, and I can tell you for a fact I've been doing philosophy for a very long time.
And you don't know what it is.
And I'll tell you what, he has not actually put together an argument. He has put together. I can tell you that I've heard him twice now, because I wouldn't have said this unless I heard it twice. He said, you believe in such and such, therefore such and such. That's not how a syllogism works at all. That's, by the way, no, with due respect, no, that's not how it works. No, it's not. You don't know how to construct a syllogism, okay? You can't say you believe in this, therefore this. Doesn't work like that. It has to be, okay, so you're going to start from a general, go to a specific. And you, hold on. You have done a bad job in creating an argument.
Listen.
Okay.
So you know... Is he being timed? Are you being timed? Is he being timed right now? Is he being timed right now? Time it. Because here's the thing. I don't like when people transition time to untimed discussion. You just want to have the talking jaw because you think you're the main man.
Okay, alright. Do you want to press the button? Alright, start again, because I'm on side. See, the vine... No, hold on, don't get involved. Don't get involved. You ran away. Please don't get involved. One at a time. One at a time. But you need 2 on 1. Is that how it needs to be?
David, let him go.
Let him go. I can't speak. It's not physically possible to speak to people outside.
Let him go.
So are you ready?
The brother said he's a child, brother.
So, okay, let's start with the first thing he said, which is the only thing really intelligible that he said, which is that the proposition of divine simplicity indicates that when you say that something is an attribute of God, it's saying that that's identical to the essence of God. That is what the Mu'tazilis believe, by the way, and that is what Thomas Aquinas believe.
You believe in
hold on.
I'm just speaking to myself.
No, don't get involved in my conversation, yeah? I know you're trying to get rude. Don't get involved. Yeah, so the point is that if that's the case, you have to admit today that God is not love. You know why? Because if God is love, is identical to the essence, God's love is also identical to the law of identity, is also identical to his knowledge. So God's love is God's knowledge, and God's knowledge is God's power. You must admit to this. And if that's the case, you believe in a God without attributes. You are, as many Christians would say, pretty much an atheist, because you believe in a deistic God a non-personal God, a God that can't love, a God that can't be merciful, a God that can't be powerful, a God that, because these things, these descriptors and attributes, when you say that God's power is identical to his essence, if God's power is identical to his essence, and his knowledge is identical to his power, it follows God's power is God's knowledge. It follows God's power is God's love. It follows God's power is God's compassion, and so on and so forth. Therefore, you have to admit today that you don't believe in a God that loves. Go ahead and do it.
Okay, so is that you conceding time? Okay, good. So your argument, so notice how he didn't really respond to the argument and that we're just moving arguments. I thought we would agree to a structure of we point to one argument, then we point to another once the one has either been refuted or conceded to. But let me entertain it, then also go back to the argument at hand. And why is he looking like he's part of Incredibles right now? So, the first point is that anti-reflex identity does not work within the Trinity. Just as much as, for example, when we say the Son is God, we do not therefore say that whenever we're talking of God, we're talking of the Son, just as much as we say Muhammad's job is human, but when we pick out humanity, we're not talking about Muhammad's job. That is anti-reflex identity, my friend, and it does not work in the case of the Trinity. My second point is again going to be that we can be apophatic about these things within syllogism. We can say that because you do not believe in X, therefore you're going to have the position which entails Y. If you reject that God is not composed of parts, therefore he is composed of parts. Do you see the point here? If you reject a negative, therefore you're going to affirm the positive, that is that God is composed of parts. Now the reason why you believe in this is because the essence of God is going to be comprised of less than the whole itself.
So he didn't answer my question. He has not conceded to the fact that if you say that God's power is identical to his essence and his knowledge is identical to his essence, it follows that his knowledge is identical to his power by the law of identity. That is a logical law. In fact, one of the most foundational, propositional, logical laws. He's talking as if he's making some kind of argument. He's not making an argument. He has not conceded to the fact that on his view of divine simplicity, he must acknowledge that God does not love. God is not loving. When you say God is loving, you're using that as a descriptive. It's not actually talking about something with ontological status within God. So he has to now acknowledge, before we move forward, he has to tell me, yes, when I say God is love, when Christians say God is love, according to divine simplicity, it's not true that he's actually love in an ontologically real sense. It's just some words we say. So that would mean that according to us, God is really love, and according to you, God is not love. So let's make that clear first, and then we can move on to other things. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I want to demonstrate that supposedly this very foundational principle of identity is just going to pull him into extreme positions. So hijab, during my time, I want to ask you a question. Hijab, you're a human, yes? Hijab, stop filming for your OnlyFans for a minute and answer my question.
You've got your time.
Okay, so hijab equals human. Human does not equal hijab. I wonder why. Because anti-reflex identity does not work in the case of the Trinity. Just because hijab is human does not, whenever I say this individual here is a human, he is therefore hijab. I wonder why. Because identity does not work in this way. I can be identical to the divine essence, for example, whilst also, for example, possessing hypostatic properties. Hijab can be identical to humanity, whilst not everyone who is human be identical to hijab. So can you concede that this concept of identity is not sufficient in all things, and I can make the argument for why in the case of the divine essence it also does not follow. So I want him to at least reiterate what I said, because he did not answer my question when I said that I was going to allow him to speak in my time. Now can he stop posing for his OnlyFans? I'm 16!
Well, I know you're 16. You sound like a 16-year-old.
Hijab and pedophilia. They go hand in hand.
You're the one touching him. You're the one touching him. You're touching him.
Touching him, but you want to watch him?
You're touching him. Anyway.
Whatever, hijab.
Anyway, the point is this.
Around this all day.
Okay, thank you very much. Is it my time? Is it my time? Yeah. All right.
I've got to do the policies. I'm going to go.
The point is if you use it with the universal outside of God's essence. So here the difference is if I say that animality or horsiness or any kind of universal that exists within, and then I say X is equivalent to Y, then yes, there could be a difference. But we're not talking about that. We're saying that if God's attribute, yes, is the same as his essence, we're not using a universal here. This is not a genus or universal that a nominalist can say in his conceptualizing is some kind of thing which is abstract from God. We're saying we're using God to compare him with God. So I'm saying that according to divine simplicity, this is what they say. the divine simplists say that the attribute of God is equivalent to the essence of God. So if it's equivalent to the essence of God, if God's power is God's essence, then and God's knowledge is God's essence, it follows God's power is God's knowledge. It follows and so on and so forth. Which means when Christians say God is love, if they believe in divine simplicity, they're lying to you. That's what it means. It means they don't actually believe in God being love in any real ontological sense. That's it. So can you concede that? Can we move on now?
Because like you haven't really argued for why the argument follows, right? You're just bringing a case of identity that being anti-reflux identity, then already assuming it applies to the Trinity, by then saying an arbitrary criteria of this identity being in play is that a universal has to be the thing that we're talking about. I again don't have to concede to this, you have to argue for it. You notice how for someone that was picking out my poor debating skills, he already runs from an assumption, from an argument he's already run away from. He ran away initially from an argument against composition, then ran to my position whilst having an argument that assumes a principle of identity to which I don't agree to. So I want hijab to argue for why this thing actually follows. You were just being apathetic and saying it's not in the case of a genus, therefore it has to be in the case of a particular, for example, that anti-reflux identity does follow. I wanted to argue this. You just said I can't play on negatives in order to pose a positive, therefore he has to do the exact same thing within his argument. Now, again, why does he keep on posing? I want to know. I do want to talk about pedophilia as a small argument.
Time's up, man. You can talk about pedophilia you like. That's what they do when they lose debates. They have to talk about pedophilia.
It's like a desperate
Okay, let's get started. Look, at the end of the day, I was making it very clear, all right? If you believe by the law of identity that God's power is God's essence and God's knowledge is God's essence, it follows God's power is God's knowledge. This is in a GCSE way for you to understand. I know you're a GCSE student. I remember this one. Trust me, if you are my A-level student, and I know I've got 6 degrees, one of the most qualified men in the world, actually.
Sells fake.
Well, I haven't said that.
That sells fake degrees.
No problem. Put that to the side if you think that. Go and ask the University of Oxford. Go and ask the University of Birmingham yourself. No problem. No problem. Here's the thing. If I was teaching him in school, I'd give him a C+ for effort.
Your face.
You get a C+ for effort.
part of your team.
You get a C+. Yeah, you can. You could be an extra.
I'm an actor!
You could be an extra.
Hollywood, baby!
We can get the hot water in the coffees and stuff like that. But here's the point. Yeah, the point I'm making to you is, if you can't concede this, we could just move on. I didn't say anything about the Trinity. It gets worse if we talk about the Trinity. Way worse.
It's a concession.
Way worse. But go ahead and tell us that God is not love. Go ahead.
Well, no, because again, okay, listen, okay. He's saying that this principle of identity, which he hasn't even named, by the way, he's just saying this thing of identity that everyone knows about in GCSE level, that he hasn't argued for in the case of the Trinity, follows that therefore he does not possess attributes. Again, what I'm contending is the fact that yes, I agree that these attributes are identical to God's essence. I do not believe, although, that that God is going to equal his attributes. His anti-reflux identity. Hijab is human. This guy's human, he's not hijab. That's the point. You have to argue these principles whenever you apply it to a particular thing. You've just been apathetic. It is not in the case of a genus or a universal. We're talking about a particular, therefore it follows. It doesn't. You're just saying in some cases, in this case, it works. Therefore, if it's not this case, it shouldn't work. It's not how you do debating, my friend. It's a false assumption. You want to say you want to move on because you've got poor rhetoric. So far, we've moved to Allah that you believe can be proven on
Hands up. Look, now it gets worse because I'm going to put him to bed now, sleep, and maybe he's going to get some sexual thoughts. Sorry to say. When I said this, no, he's not pedophilia. But here's what I'm going to say. Be quiet, my friend. Be quiet. You keep talking about pedophilia every time you see me. I don't know what the situation is.
Because you are
I don't know. Sure, I'm not going to bring my kids here. I tell you that for sure. I mean, this guy here keeps talking about pedophilia. But anyway, the point. Let me start my time. The point I'm making to you is now. We've said this and he tried to defend it and he has no defense. Because the thing is, he's in a dilemma. If he says that these are actual attributes of an ontological status, then he affirms the kind of composition he wishes to deny. If he says they're not, then he actually falls into a kind of collapse of attributes, which leads to not believing in any of the attributes, including God's love, which means you can't, as Christians, say that God is love. Now, Muslims can say it, so that's, I don't know why you haven't admitted it. Number one. Number two is this. It gets even worse when you go into the Trinity. Do you know why? Because if you say that the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is God, in that sense, if they are all God in distinct personas, as they say, and as Gregory of Nyssa and Gregory of Nazianzus and his Cappadocian authorities say. I don't know how it could be the case. How could it be the case that you believe in 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, but you don't believe in parts of God? It's absolutely ridiculous to postulate that. You don't believe in, you believe in no composition, but you believe in a Trinity. Try and square the circle for me, my friend.
Okay, so again, and he's brought up the essence as it pertains to the substantiations, i.e. the persons. So Hijab, please answer this question in my time. Hijab,
No.
are you equal to humanity? Are you a human? Do you want to answer me?
Yes.
Because I can, okay, he's running this argument. The Son is God. God, therefore, is the Son. The Son is not the Father, because then you either lead into composition or you lead to polytheism. Although we reject polytheism, we say there's one God, therefore it leads into composition. But I want to ask him this, and this makes very perfect sense. Hijab is a human. JC is a human. Is JC Muhammad Hijab? No. Because there's a thing called anti-reflux identity, which I've been begging for him, like all the children that he wants to say can marry adults, for him to say that why does this not work in the case of yourself, but works in the case of the Trinity?
Why is that
Please!
Why is that not polytheism?
Is it time? Is it time?
Don't worry, I'll answer.
Okay, again, don't be a coward for Allah and resolve the issue of composition. I want you to answer why you affirm that the first act is Allah, whilst also the first action of Allah is to compose
Kids
himself.
nowadays have very little respect. No problem.
Yeah, you like to respect, don't you? Yeah, I know you do.
It's embarrassing. Look, here's the thing. Yeah, what he's describing, as I mentioned before, I don't think he's been paying attention. He's C grade now, but he can become a B grade if he listens a little bit closer, right?
Inshallah.
Here's what I'll say to you. Be very. This is what I'm saying to you. When you're dealing with a particular and a universal, it's different to dealing with two things with supposedly the same ontological value. So, for example, if you say that God's attribute is God, we're talking about God's attribute, we're assuming God's attribute has actual ontological status. And then God's essence has actual ontological status. A nominalist or a conceptualist would say that a universal does not have an actual, maybe a conceptualist will, but definitely a nominalist will not say they have an actual ontological status. There are social constructs in many ways. So if you say that this person is a human, this person is a human, it's not the same, because we're talking about here with attributes and essence distinction, both of which are meant to be real in God. So my point to you again, do you concede, considering this response, do you concede that according to your idea of divine simplicity, God is not loving in a real ontological sense? Yes or no?
Wait, okay. So again, so firstly, he's assuming that universals.
That just sounded you lost again.
He's assuming that universals don't really exist.
Okay.
He's assuming that universals do not really exist. I'm just going to say, and to avoid that language has no real meaning, we want to say that universals really do exist. That's because, for example, if we pick out, am I like not important for this guy? I'll start talking to him next time. Okay. So the reason why universals have to really exist is because we have to avoid the fact that language therefore becomes meaningless. So for example, when we say that Allah has attributes, we're picking out this normative definition of what it means when we say that Allah is loving, for example. If you want to say that, in fact, this is not a universal, it can be anything mind-dependent upon the person. The common definition is what we're going to pick out in the universal of what we're referring to what is love. So why are you assuming that universals do not really exist within your argument? That's my first point. My second point, again, is you're just saying that it does not work in the case of a universal, or it does work in the case of a universal, even though in a particular it doesn't, and you're then just assuming that these universal natures do not really exist.
So if universals do exist in a platonically real sense that he's talking about, like what Plato believed, that there was a whole place there where the universe exists in a perfect sense, if they do exist in that sense, then his argument falls. Because actually, his argument only makes sense, his response only makes sense if the universal is not real. If you're saying that, for example, Muhammad is a human and you're a human, and so therefore me, I'm not you, if that's what basically he's saying, humanity here is a universal which is not real in that sense. If it is real, then it does become a contradiction. Because if there is such a thing as a personified, manifested humanity or perfect human person, which Plato believed there was some kind of man there standing maybe in the heavens somewhere, Neoplatonic realism, if you believe in that, it actually does fall apart, which means if I'm that guy and you're that guy, how can we both be that guy at the same time? It's a contradiction. The same thing applies with the Trinity, and the same thing applies with your attributes of God on divine simplicity. So you fail. You fail. D- actually, but because you've been a little bit cognizant, I might give you a C+ and pass you, but I'm going to give you one more chance. Do you admit that God is not love, yes or no?
So I've got a question. So let's go back to the analogy of Muhammad is a human. What exactly are we picking out, or what exactly is being invoked when we say hijab is a human and JC is a human? Of course, there's going to be this common definition that is invoked when we say that these two subjects are the same thing. Just to say that they don't really exist, I don't hold to this Neoplatonic understanding of that there is a perfect can of Coke that really exists somewhere else. I'm just not saying that they have to be conceptual or mind dependent on the person. That's metalinguistic nominalism, which I don't hold to, although you could hold to, therefore meaning that language has no definite meaning. But I want to ask Hijab this. He says they don't exist at all. They don't have any ontological status. Well, that's what you just said on camera, and they'll pick that out. And again, he wants to answer me when he thinks it's going to better his argument, but when I actually want to ask an honest to good question within my time, he doesn't want to because it will not help him. Now, what is being picked out when we say that Hijab is a human and JC is a human?
Okay, that's my time now, yeah? So, has it got a couple of seconds left?
Whatever. Okay.
All right, cool. So here's the point. Here's the thing. I haven't declared my position whether I'm a conceptualist or a nominalist or whatever I am. I'm just basically saying to you that if you believe that, as you've mentioned, that universals do exist, the question would be then, in what context do they exist? In what context do they exist? Is it in a Neoplatonic, real kind of context? If not that context, in what context? In what context does humanity exist with actual ontological significance? So for example, Plato believed that there was a perfect man out there, that we, like human beings, would, connect to it. So for example, what differentiates a sword from a knife? According to Plato, there's like an archetype of what a sword is somewhere, an archetype of what a knife is somewhere, and then, wherever corresponds with that is a line. Now, if you don't believe in universals like that, if you believe in universals are real, the question in number one is, in what context are they real? And number two, how is it not now a contradiction? If I say, for example, I'm a human, which corresponds to something which is real, and he's a human, that actually does cause a contradiction. So once again, it's been refuted, but he doesn't understand it. If I can say one more time you want, I can try and scaffold it for you, I can try and put it in a syllogism, but I don't think you understand. This is your last chance. Is God love? Yes or no on your view? Is God love?
Okay, so I'm only going to answer the question if it's not bounded on a framework that I don't have to agree to. So you notice how instead of actually answering my question on his nominalism, he just wants to ask the person which I'm not using these concepts, he is. If he's superimposing these concepts onto me in case of performing a refutation, that therefore necessitates that he's going to have to provide a position on which this argument actually works. I can't suppose divine simplicity when critiquing Allah because I know divine simplicity does not work in the case of Allah. So then I have to ask you a clarifying question in the case of nominalism or universals in order to further our principle of identity in the application of a critique of the Trinity. So then what do you take then to be nominalism, or what is your position on nominalism? Because I'll say metalinguistic nominalism, or any form of nominalism rather, is just going to lead to concepts like humanity being meaningless. Because again, I'm asking you this when I said to you that anti-reflux identity does not work in the case of this particular, the Trinity, and this universe of humanity, and you're contesting with universals. So what is being picked out when we say the universal of humanity? If you want to say it's man-dependent, it has no meaning whatsoever. It's non-cognitive. Humanity could mean pedophilia in the case of Muhammad hijab, which it probably does.
All right, so just because you said that, you've lost privilege to talk to me.
Okay.
Now you can go on. Honestly, don't disrespect. Because I know you can beat your dad, you can disrespect your mum at home, you can disrespect your dad, you can disrespect your Uncle Barry. Don't come and talk about pedophilia. Don't disrespect.
You're just talking to him.
No, hold on. He's fine first.
Feelings?
I haven't come to you with anything like that. I haven't disrespected you like that.
The first thing you said is you're not worth your time. The first thing you said on camera is I'm not worth your time.
Sure.
I am not worth your time.
That's not calling you a pedophile.
That's saying I'm worthless.
So now that you are worthless in my eyes,
Oh, I
and
am.
you're gonna see my back, know that I've asked him 5-6 times about the love thing. He couldn't answer it once.
Yeah.
Go back to your daddy. Maybe he can teach you a couple manners. Go back to your mum. Maybe she'll give you a little spank. Yeah, and maybe he'll get
Because my
excited
dad's
about
age
that.
and my mum's
And that's
age are
it.
equal. It's not
Yeah, it
like
doesn't
that.
matter, but anyway, we'll see. Okay, anything you get. Don't nick your stone now, boy. The only argument they've got is pedophilia.
No, I gave her an argument. But I gave her an argument. I gave her an argument.
Go back to your school.
Well, go back to your masjid because you can't defend Allah. You can't defend him. You cannot. Okay, notice how the agreed discussion.
Hijab, get back here. Hey, hijab, get back here.
Young Bob.
He's running. Wow. Okay. So he just ran away mid-combo.
Is Islam a race? Okay, so how am I racist if I'm just picking out the fact
And are you calling him racist because he's white? That's kind of racist.
Okay, so he can have a
All right, I'm going. No. I'm not done with it. I'm not done with it.
Okay,
I'm not done with it.
I've got
I ain't done with it.
So God bless you all. I just want to say it's surreal for me. I don't want to be prideful. I honestly think it's not worth it. I think a lot of TikTok and Discord Muslims are probably going to laugh at the discussion we probably had because I'm not a philosopher, but he likes to claim he is. I had to re-remember all the things that I loosely learned of other people who are more smarter than myself. So I'm never going to claim or merit my knowledge of anyone else. That's my first point. My second point is my argument is just that this principle of identity to which he's founding his argument of the Trinity does not work in the case of the Trinity because it does not work in other cases. Therefore, this principle has to be argued for. That is my first point. My second point is the agreed structured discussion was firstly on Islam, then secondly on Christianity, where we fairly give an argument for both religions. Besides from that, God bless you all. I hope this doesn't mess up my future. Calling the guy a pedophile.
Family, we're gonna end the stream. Thank you for joining. Hit the like, share. Love you all. Thank you for joining us. And I'll try to go live maybe in 20 minutes. So hit the notification button. Take care.